Hey everyone, it's Dr. Leith. I'm recording this for addictions. I want to say how much I appreciate each of you and the patience you have extended me. Um, I'm doing what I can to make sure that you guys leave the semester feeling prepared for addictions, or at least have a foundation of what it means to work with addictions and things like that. Last week there wasn't a video on assessment, so I'm tying a little bit of that in with this video. So we will have some assessment information as well as starting the process of doing individual treatment for substance use and abuse. But before we even get started with that, I just want to say I hope everybody is well. I miss seeing everybody. I miss having the role playing and the discussions and stuff that we had. I felt like we really hit our stride before COVID put us into lockdown. I hope everyone's well. I hope your families are well and that you're taking care of yourselves. And please let me know what you need from me. Um, I am working on making sure everybody's emails are being answered. If I haven't gone to your emails, I'm very sorry, but I will. I'm nearly caught up. So I hope everybody's well. Thank you for your patience and for the well wishes. So why don't we get into individual treatment and assessment for addiction? Let's see here. Really stepped up my YouTube game here. I can switch back and forth between scenes. Look at that. So, all right, and this is posted on Blackboard. Feel free to change the format. I figured I would gussy it up a little bit so it's not just text. I mean, it's still text, but at least there's some color on it now. So, individual treatment. So, because we don't have the class anymore and it's difficult to kind of gauge everything, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you what I would do when I work with someone who comes in for substance use, abuse, addiction, things like that. And a lot of this stuff, just so that you know, in case you start wondering it, yeah, a lot of this stuff transfers over to any of the issues that you might work with, like what I'm going to go over now with introductions, right? So after you've done all the informed consent stuff, right, that's just, we're tabling that, you've done it, you know how to do it, etc. If y'all would like a demonstration of that, send me an email and I can cook up a quick video. But when you're done with all that, you've done your introductions, right? My name's Chris. I'm a licensed professional counselor, etc., etc. Um, Tell me what brings you in, and that's where you let them take the lead. So in this case, let's say we're working with someone with substance use or addictions, and they say, um, "I think I have a drinking problem. I'm trying to cut back. I've relapsed." Oh, well, why do you think that? Why do you think you have a drinking problem? Why do you think that there's an issue? When they say, well, I'm only here because my husband told me to be here. I'm here because my wife told me to come here. I'm here because my family said I drink too much or I have a problem, right? Well, why do you think they would say that? Wow, sounds intense. Tell me more about that. And reflecting, right? Sounds frustrating. Sounds like this has been bothering you. Sounds like this has been an ongoing issue for you and your partner. Um, Tell me more about that. So you can see where that tell me more statement comes in, but you're reading the situation. Don't just launch into, well, how much do you drink, right? We don't need to go there yet. We need to lay the foundation of rapport. Um, what do you think, especially when you have people coming in saying, um, my family or someone else wants me to come? Well, what do you think about that? Do you think you have a drinking problem? Right? Gauging them, because this is important. We go over this in a couple slides. Figuring out where they are in terms of their understanding of the situation and stages of change. And once you kind of lay this down, take your time. There's no rush, right? You're doing your informed consent, your introduction, you're demonstrating I'm not going to judge you. I'm not rushing to diagnose. I'm not rushing to say, well, yeah, they're right. You do have a drinking problem. And saying after they kind of get there, like, geez, I want them off my back. I'm doing this so they'll stop complaining. I'm doing this because they said they're going to kick me out. Okay, well, I'm wondering then, would you mind if I ask you a couple questions about your drinking or your smoking or whatever? And hopefully they'll say no, like, let's do it. But if they say, yeah, I do mind, right, be ready. And usually what I would say is something to the effect of, um, okay, no worries, I get it. It sounds like it's a really touchy subject. I completely understand. So what would you like to talk about then? So let's, for the sake of example, say that they're willing to move forward, and even if they disagree, they don't think they have a problem. Regardless of that, they're saying, "Yeah, sure, ask whatever you want. I'm an open book." Let's move into our assessment, right? Let's gauge the level of use. We have to know what they're using, how much, the severity of it, all that good stuff. So one that's really easy, really quick is Cage. Then in Module 3, there were a couple examples, and this is something that, there's forms you can find online, but this is easy enough that you can just remember it. So asking about cutting back. Have you ever tried to cut back on your use? Have you ever thought about cutting back? Has anybody ever told you that you need to cut back, right? Annoyed with the topic. Have you ever gotten annoyed because people keep saying you use too much, you do too much? Guilty. You ever feel guilty for drinking? And eye openers. And this is probably the red flag here. This is, do you ever need to use or to drink to get going first thing in the morning, right? So Dr. Bob, who we haven't covered a whole lot of 12-step stuff yet. Dr. Bob was a surgeon. He's also one of the founders of 12-step and AA. He did this before he entered into recovery. He had a surgery and he woke up after a night of binging, and he was shaking. He needed to drink just to kind of level himself out, right? So if someone wakes up and the first thing they need to do is to drink, that's a pretty big red flag. This I'm in no way suggesting, because they say yes, you're automatically like, well, that's an addiction, right? Could be a couple different issues for that, but it is a red flag of something. Now let's move on a little more in depth, right? The referral source. Who referred you? And why? Right? So I'm here because my dad said I should go. I'm here because a friend of mine said I should go. My pastor said I should get counseling. Okay, and who is this person? Why would they say that? What led up to that referral? What do you use? So the history, and here we're talking about the history of substance use, right? What do you use? What is your drug of choice? I like to ask also, do you have a second place, right? So someone might say, I love smoking weed. That's my thing. It's caused all this friction at home. Okay, and what if there was no weed? What's the alternative? Well, I like to drink, or I like to do something, right? Whatever that might be. But kind of giving a range of options for them, or that they're presenting to you. What do you use? And then really important stuff. When did you start, right? In both in terms of when did you start substance use in general, and when did you start that specific substance. Explore the onset. What was going on then? How old were you? What was life like then? Was it a group of friends? Was it family, a sibling that introduced it? And there's some really interesting literature about who forms addictions when we talk about age and things like that. So there's a group, typically we say it's a young onset when the person's younger than 25. It's an older onset when they're older than 25. There is this notion of instant onset addiction, which is there's not a whole lot of literature on it. It's a lot of anecdotal stuff, but this is someone who, um, after I took my first hit, I was hooked, right? They talk about the immediacy of needing more of that. And I've had clients who did that. One who tried several different drugs and was very resilient to addiction. There were drugs he liked and drugs he didn't. But when he got to cocaine, then this was it, right? I need more of this, right? Um, and so instant onset, what was it like? When did you start thinking there was a problem? When did it become a problem with others? Like when did they start saying that? And then no addiction. There can be people who they have lots and lots of drug use or substance use and addiction never occurs. That doesn't mean that they didn't have some consequences. It just means they were able to stop whenever they wanted. But you're exploring, how old were you? What was life like then? What was that experience like? I like exploring. Tell me about that first round. Tell me about the first time you got drunk. Tell me about the first time you used pot. Tell me about the first time you did that. What was it like? You might even go into other notable times, right? Do you have a favorite memory? Because remember, here, we want to try to refrain from going into a place of just chastising and saying, oh, this is all bad, this is all bad. They have people in their life that are telling them what they did was wrong and bad and things like that. And while obviously we're not condoning or suggesting drug use, we also don't want to vilify them or what they've done, right? That's just going to push them away, mess up our rapport. Without a therapeutic alliance, it doesn't matter what kind of expert you are, it's not going to work. Now let's move into treatment history. Have you ever gone to counseling? Have you ever gone to counseling for this? What did you focus on? What worked? What didn't work? Why did you stop? And again, you can see even in these three areas that this applies to lots of different counseling things, right? Even non-clinical issues, right? When people talk about their past counseling experiences, I'll ask what worked, what did you take away from it? And people, it's really one of three categories. I loved it, I didn't love it at all, or something in the middle where it's like, it was okay, I took some stuff away. Why did you stop? Financial reasons, moving, or the problem kind of resolved itself, or it was ineffective. But you want to find out what worked and what didn't so that you can take advantage of what did and you can avoid any pitfalls that may have been there before. Moving on, their level of current functioning. So what are your relationships like? How is work? How's family? How's school, right? We're looking at just their life. How's it going, right? What major stressors do you have? What support do you have? Things like that. Again, you would do this regardless of the client and regardless of the issue. Family history pertaining to drug use, right? Do family members have an addiction? Was drinking and drug use common? This is also a good place to start looking at cultural differences, right? What was expected? Did you have support from mom and dad? Things like that, or the caregivers. And then personal history. So notable life events, right? Divorces, grief, trauma, all of that stuff, including the strengths, right? We're looking at victories, support systems, milestones, especially if you're working with adolescents and youth, right? Did they hit the developmental milestones, walking, talking, potty training, sleeping through the night, things like that. And cultural things, right? Regardless of which cultural factors, right? Whether it's ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, country of origin, things like that. Especially in terms of substance use and addiction, that can play a role, right? So we've got that. Person details their life to us, told us some about their drinking and drugging history. So now we want to know how severe it is, right? So When I work with young adults or college students, right, well, a big part of college culture is absolutely drinking, and then there's also a lot of drug use, right? So, how often do you think that's a lot? Um, tell me more about how your friends and family were saying that's a lot. Consequences, and you might have to help them with this. This is difficult. What have you ever had any negative outcomes from your drinking or from your use? Give examples. Have you ever blacked out, passed out? Have you ever done something you regretted while you were under the influence? And a lot of people immediately go to a place of like, I had sex with someone, I got into a fight, but it could also just be I picked a fight or an argument with a spouse. I disclosed secrets, right? Some of those less like attention grabbing consequences that can still be just as problematic. How did you handle that situation, right? Because some of them will say, after that, I went and got treatment. I never spoke about it. I stopped hanging out with them. I took a break from whatever. And what happened after? Continuing with severity, physical effects. Remember the red flags for addiction: intolerance and withdrawal. Tell me how much you need to drink to get where you want to go, right? And that's pretty much how I would say it, right? To bring in some levity with it so they're not feeling completely like interrogated and things like that. But so do you drink to get drunk? Do you drink to unwind? Tell me about that. Okay, well, how many drinks does it take before you start feeling more confident? How much do you have to smoke before you unwind, right? Was it always that way? Some people have naturally high tolerances. Have you ever had withdrawal? Do you know what withdrawal is, right? Have you ever needed something to make your body stop shaking or to stop a headache, things like that? And overdoses. Have you ever done this so much that you had to go to a hospital or someone had to call 911? Behavioral dependence. So this is that psychological aspect of it. So this is, do you ever feel like you can't handle a stressful situation unless you have the substance? Right? So with college students or even grad school students, when you have an exam coming up, do you feel like you have to drink, like you have to get high, you have to smoke to manage that stress as though you can't cope without it? Cognitive impairments, right? So memory damage, memory loss, short term, long term, abstract reasoning, things like that. This is something that I would encourage you to partner up with like a medical provider to help determine some of this. Medical consequences, right? So damage to the liver, damage to the heart, kidneys, to really any part of the body. So this is the stuff I use so much that now I have this medical problem. And then motivation for change, right? We go through all that, and I end here, not necessarily end the session, but end my assessment with this motivation for change, right? So, do you think you have a problem? I'm not interested in everybody else. Um, I'm interested in what you think. Do you think there's a problem? Do you think you need to cut back? Do you think you have it under control? If they're ambivalent, what do you think about stopping? What do you think about reducing? For some people, going to a place of abstinence only is a really big turnoff, and it shuts down. And even though I might introduce the option, it's like, it's okay, you don't have to stop. What about cutting back? You said that you needed 8 drinks. What if you stopped at 6 or 7? And then, regardless, what would you like to work on? Is this something that you'd like to work on? If they say yes, great, we move on, we make a treatment plan. If they say no, okay, what would you like to work on? Now, based on the severity, we may need to determine what treatment setting is best. So here's kind of a hierarchy, right? At the very, very severe end, we have medical placement with detoxification, right? So this is someone who needs the supervised detox. They can't be left alone. They run the risk of serious injury or death. Residential treatment, so this is the inpatient type rehab, the Minnesota model, right, where you're in for 7 days, 14 days, 28 days. You have a variety of providers, but you're in a place that is secure from, or in theory would be secure from the substance of choice. Partial hospitalization or day treatment. So this is maybe going to a treatment facility for 8 hours a day, but you're not residing there. It's not overnight. A temporary recovery home, so like an Oxford House type situation, where I'm here, I have some amount of recovery, and I'm trying to keep it that way. Intensive outpatient, so this is going to a treatment joint for maybe 4 hours, right? Instead of the 1 hour sessions that we have, you might be going for half a day, and then finally we have the outpatient, which is if you go to a private practice, right, for your 1 hour or an hour and a half session. And this is based on the level of severity. So now, in my assessment that I was telling you about, we left off on motivation and change. So now, let's talk about motivation, right? Because in my opinion, more so with addiction and substance use than any other counseling issue, you're really beside your client, and we're reading them, we're trying to see what do they want to do, and looking at their motivation for change. When they are at a different place than you are, then you're both spinning your wheels, nothing's getting done. So we want to understand what motivates them to stay the same, to change, where they are with that. So we're going to review some motivational interviewing. That's where we left off before we went online. Talked about stages of change, which I'm willing to bet most of you are familiar with, and then tying these two things together. So a couple reminders about addiction. And I think this is really important that you remember this. There is no one treatment or theory that is better than all the others for addiction and substance use, right? They all have benefits. They all have costs. I don't want to say cons. There's costs. Some of them require more time. Some of them don't go as in depth, right? But whatever your theory is, it has a place in the addiction treatment realm. So if you are existential or REBT, and then you see all this literature on it, well, CBT is best, or Gestalt works fine. You know, it's how you use it, right? What's really important is that you tailor your treatment to your specific client. We're not just, doing the cookie cutter thing and saying, here's another person with insert problem, copy and paste the treatment plan over to them. Brief interventions can be very effective. Work on other life issues can influence substance use outcomes, right? So maybe someone's in a really unhealthy relationship or has a really toxic household, something like that. Working on that issue because maybe they're not ready to work on the substance use. Resolving some of this other life stuff can curtail the substance use or lead to work on substance use. Consequences, and this is something I brought up, because someone has suffered a consequence because of their use, that does not always mean an addiction. However, just because someone doesn't maybe meet the threshold for addiction does not mean that they don't have problematic use, right? You can still have a problem without an addiction, and you can still have an addiction without any catastrophic consequences. And really important, regardless of the counseling issue, but especially pertinent with addictions and substance use, outcomes are very, very strongly tied to your relationship with your client. So you matter, right? You can't I can't make a script, give it to a counselor, and they just read from it and it works. It depends on your rapport. Your therapeutic alliance is always going to be more important and more impactful than your therapeutic or theoretical allegiance. You could be the world expert on motivational interviewing and CBT, but if your client does not like you and you do not have those rapport building skills, it will not matter. So how you come across and how you build rapport with your client and the type of relationship you build absolutely influences the outcome. So let's talk about motivational interviewing. This slide may be familiar from one of the other, and there's a few of these slides that I took from the previous motivational interviewing presentations. The spirit of motivational interviewing is to collaborate. Miller and Rolnick were very against the authoritarian prescriptive stance, like this is what you're gonna do. You have a problem, I have the solution, right? We're working together, right? It's evocative, right? Pulling ideas out from the person, right? Instead of placing them on them. And respecting autonomy, their ability to choose. That's why it's so important to say things like, do you mind if I do this? What would you like to work on? So collaboration, working with the client, right? You're not a teacher, you're not an authority figure, right? Nor would you probably want to be, right? But we're showing them like, hey, I'm here with you and I'm here for you. I'm not telling you what you need to do. And if you decide to do this thing, I support you. If you decide not to, I support you. That doesn't mean that you validate invalid or unhealthy behavior, but it means that we're working together and I'm not prescribing to you what to do. Evocative, right? I'm pulling out ideas from the client instead of saying, you know what you should do? You should do this. I think you have a problem with whatever. And decision making is left to the client. If they don't want to do something, then they don't want to do something. Again, that doesn't mean that you're going to always condone it. It just means that you're not going to say, well, my way or the highway. So kind of comparison, collaborating versus confronting, motivational interviewing. Confrontation has its place, but we're not there to try to convince them you're wrong, I'm right. Evoking versus educating, and autonomy versus authority. So the basic principles: avoid arguing, right? They have people at home to do that with. Roll with resistance, right? And this is a term that you've heard. Your textbook probably either describes it as, or your theory textbook or skills textbook will either say it's like doing a dance or it's like karate, right? But resistance comes and we got to do something with it. But meeting head on, right? I'm going to raise my voice and puff out my chest and exert my expertise doesn't work with it. We're taking it and we're going with it. Expressing empathy, helping develop discrepancy with what they're saying, and supporting self-efficacy. So just before I go a little bit further, avoiding arguing makes sense, right? Rolling with resistance, you get it. Okay, I hear you, you're frustrated, tell me about that. Expressing empathy, wow, that must be really difficult. Developing discrepancy, really important. And so this is, someone says, I really want to save my marriage. I really want to be the best parent I can be. I really want to get a promotion. And at the same time, the discrepancy is I do this thing that gets in the way of that goal. So I've given this example. I want to be a counselor. I want to be a licensed professional counselor. I want to have a private practice. But I skip my classes. I don't study. I give in shoddy work, right? So that's the discrepancy. Here's my goal, here's my behavior, and the two are misaligned, right? In this case, we would be focusing on the substance use, right? That you say that you want to do these things, and at the same time, continuing to do this behavior. And supporting self-efficacy, right? That they can do this, right? Notoriously with addiction and substance use, there is a lot of I can't do this, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of low affect and mood. So pulling up, yeah, yes, this is going to be difficult, right? Don't sugarcoat it. This is going to be really hard, and I can do it. You can do it. Stages of change, right? You've heard of this, the trans-theoretical model: pre-contemplation, contemplation, determination, action, maintenance, and relapse. So with pre-contemplation, the person's not even thinking about the issue, right? Imagine someone being truly surprised when they're told, you drink a lot. I think you have a drinking problem, right? That, me? That's pre-contemplation. I'm not, of all the problems I have, my drinking is not one of them. Contemplation. So here we have some ambivalence. They're kind of playing with the idea. Maybe I have a problem, maybe I don't. Maybe it's just the situation I'm in. And ambivalence is not a bad place to be because it means that they're thinking about, do I need to change? Moving too fast, like the second they say, you know, I've been thinking about it. I think I do drink a lot. And you go, yeah, you do. Or start hurling ideas at them. Let's start a diary, things like that. That's going to push them away, right? So just like, okay, so you've been thinking about it. Tell me more about that. You seem a little ambivalent. And we want them to resolve the ambivalence, ideally, for a healthy change. This is how I'm going to do it, right? And again, you can see how this also has a place outside of substance use and addiction. Determination, action, right? They're taking steps. So they're saying, I want to stop, I want to change, but I don't know how. So for self-harm, let's kind of take a turn out of addictions for a second. Someone says, I want to stop, but I don't know how, or what do I do if I get stressed? That's where we're working, right? We're coming up with those ideas. We want to come up with ways to get them into the action phase. They're dabbling now. And we might use short-term goals. You might do something harm reductive, right? Like, okay, they're not ready to completely stop the drug use, but maybe they're willing to reduce it. Action. So intentionally acting on the client's part. So they're choosing to do it. So I want to do this, and they're taking the steps. They're trying, right? Maintenance. Now they have sustained recovery or changing their behavior for a while. I'm sorry, my allergies are just killing me today. They are trying to prevent relapse. So we're trying to navigate this new life, this new world without the behavior, without the substance. How do you do that? And focusing on skills to keep your sobriety. Now, relapse is a normal part of the recovery process, right? And really, the easiest way to conceptualize this, and this is not to tell you how to think, but for me, the easiest way is they got into a situation or a situation was put upon them that they did not have the skills to handle, right? So it might be the person has never experienced a death in their family. They've had sobriety for years. And then they have the first death in the family. They don't know how to do that. And so there's some relapse, right? So relapse comes. We can't prepare for every single thing, but that's why we're talking about self-efficacy. So they say, I don't know the solution, but I know that I will be able to handle this situation. But relapse is normal. It happens. And what happens after is ideally picking oneself up and examining what happened and learning from it. And then resolving also any issues that led to the relapse. Oh, I regret using such light colors here. I can't really see. So, ambivalence. So again, the person recognizes that maybe what I'm doing is not the healthiest thing. And they don't know if they want to change or not. And if they're thinking about changing, they don't know how to change. What would I do? So I had a client with very powerful statement said to me, when I asked, well, what do you think about stopping? Right? He was kind of at this idea of, maybe I have an issue. I don't know. I have a lot of stuff that makes me want to drink, but then there are times I drink when I don't want to, or when everything's good. And he just said, I cannot imagine my life without alcohol, but I also can't imagine my life doing it this way either. I can't imagine living this way, and I can't imagine my life without alcohol. And so that's ambivalence, right? I don't know what I want to do. So on one hand, they want something, and they want the opposite at the same time, right? I don't want the problems that my substance use brings, but I don't want to give up the substance, right? Um, in couples counseling, I don't want the relationship I'm in, but I don't want to leave the relationship, right? Ambivalence, right? So then what we wind up doing is trying to resolve that ambivalence, meaning they get to a point where they commit one way or the other. Common factor stuff is needed to resolve this ambivalence. So those person-centered things, right? Empathy, unconditional positive regard, the therapeutic relationship, congruence, etc., right? To hear them out, let yourself be a sounding board for them. Push when you need to push, validate when you need to validate. But when we're talking about change and things like that, your client's going through a whole bunch of stuff, right? They're thinking, what am I going to do? Especially if it's early on, like maybe if the client is thrust into counseling, they got into trouble and now they have to see you. And it's uncomfortable. Change is always uncomfortable, even when it's for a healthier change. So Miller and Rolnick, they describe these traps that counselors can get into. And they are very clear that these traps we're going to talk about and resistance from your client, those are all functions of you. Those are functions of the counselor, right? They don't think that people are inherently resistant, but they're put in situations where resistance is needed, right? So these are some traps to watch out for when you're working with somebody. Confrontational traps, right? So going like head first at your person, meeting head on too soon, and arguing, trying to prove your point, that's going to cause resistance. That's going to push them away, right? And it can happen, right? I know even the way I'm kind of sensationalizing it, like the client's going to sit down and you're just going to launch and pounce at them, when really it might be, ooh, that's a lot, right? Boy, it sounds like you have a problem. Sounds like you made some bad choices here, right? Confronting them is going to push them away. The question answer trap. Oh, all of you are going to do this. I did this. Omar did this. We're all going to do this. Question and answer. So this is where you don't know what to say, and you start asking a question, and they give a yes or no question answer. So then you give another close-ended question, and they give a close-ended answer, and you get nervous and you keep going. So it might be, well, tell me, do you think you drink a lot? They say no. Oh, you don't think you drink a lot? No. Does your family think you drink a lot? Maybe. Well, do you want to stop? No. Okay. Like you just keep going. And usually when I'm supervising an intern, this happens. It's just take a deep breath, relax, and reframe, right? This happens when we start asking too many direct, close-ended questions. Stop, take a second, and ask an open-ended question or give a directive. Tell me what you'd like to work on. Tell me what you like. Tell me what bothers you, right? Tell me what would drinking a lot look like, right? So collect yourself, and this happens to me, right? It still happens to me every once in a while. You just got to be able to identify when it's happening. The expert trap. So trying to fix their problem, right? And the reason that this is a problem is then the client I get to sit back. Now you guys get to see my full Infinity War shirt. I sit back and I let you take the wheel, and I don't have to do anything, right? Because you said, "Oh, I'm an addiction expert. I'm a couples expert. I work really well with this." And so you launch into, have you done this? Have you done that? Try this, try that. And they can just sit back and they don't have to worry about it. And even if they took your advice, they followed what you're laying out, if it doesn't work, it's just going to be you, because it's on you. You said to do this, you exerted yourself as the expert, and this plan didn't work, so therefore you, the counselor, are the faulty one. That's why, going back to this, That's why we want to collaborate to get out of this part. Labeling, right? So remember your person first language. There's no evidence that just like, yes, it sounds like you have an addiction. It sounds like you're an addict, right? That, or an alcoholic. This is not helpful. The premature focus trap. So focusing on the issue before the client is ready. You've gone too hard, too fast, right? So you just start digging in, right? And they weren't expecting that. You got to slow down, gauge their pace, and that's where, if you're not sure, you just ask. Do you mind if I ask some questions about this, that, or the other thing? Blaming traps. Trying to figure out, are you blaming me, right? Did you try the techniques we talked about? Did you try urge surfing? Why didn't you do that? Well, why did you go there? If you know that going to a bar is a trigger, why would you go there? Why did you do that? So blaming, right? Blame and shame. Quickest way to push someone out the door. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about self-motivational statements. So when you're working with this person, so this is opposed to the traps that you're trying to avoid, what do you focus on? The thoughts, feelings, and behavior, right? That's the trifecta. Thoughts. In what ways has smoking been a problem for you, right? So having them think. Tell me in what ways your drug use has hurt you. And to balance it out, so you're not vilifying again, it very much is a balancing act, is in what ways has it helped you, right? What benefit have you gotten from it? Affect. Tell me what worries you about this. How do you feel about that, right? Give me a feeling word. And you can spend quite a bit of time on the feeling part alone. And behaviors. So what would things be like if you stopped? What would things be like if you kept everything the same? But it's really important that, and there's no magic ratio, but if you're focusing on negative, you also pepper in some positive aspects of it, because for addiction, the behavior serves a purpose, right? It makes me more creative. It makes the world more tolerable. It makes me a better whatever. It makes me feel good, right? If we just keep on the negative, then we start sounding like everybody else. So resistance. I mentioned this before, that resistance is a therapist problem. So in other words, Miller and Rolnick, they would say, what did you do to make your client resistant? And so how does resistance show up? It shows up as arguing, right? So your client keeps challenging everything you're saying. They're interrupting you, they're denying it, or they're just ignoring you, right? And so if we were observing this, we'd say, well, what is it that you're doing that's making your client argue everything that you say? Or why are they interrupting? Maybe they're not being heard, or denying, right? So what's going on that they're doing this, right? The resistance is serving as a protective barrier for your client. So how do we diminish resistance? And so this will be just a real quick review of the motivational interviewing concepts that we went over in the last class, using your reflections, right? Demonstrating empathy. There are times where I've had to say, I get the sense that you're not real happy to be here, right? What am I doing that's making you feel uncomfortable? I'm afraid I'm making you uncomfortable, and that's not my intention. The amplified reflection, so heighten it, right? Oh, you cannot be in the same room as your partner unless you have a glass of wine, right? That way they take that opposite stance with like, whoa, I didn't say all that. The double-sided reflection, so you don't want to keep using, and at the same time, you don't feel like you should have to change. shifting, moving away from the client shield, right? So validate and push for change, right? So someone says, I have a crazy life. I have 3 jobs. I have 2 kids. I've got one parent who's in the hospital and the other one doesn't know what to do. So, I mean, drinking is the only way, or using whatever it might be, is the only way I can manage. So, a shifting reflection would be, you do have a lot going on. That is intense. It sounds very difficult. And drinking seems to be the only thing that carries you through. Are there any other things, or you feel like there aren't any other things? Right? Don't diminish what they say. That's no excuse, right? Don't do that. Agreeing with a twist, right? You're absolutely right. Having a crazy lifestyle or a crazy life can be really hectic and can make you want to drink. And there are also plenty of people who don't drink, right? And there are also ways to handle it. You've handled it without drinking. There have been times when you had this lifestyle and you didn't have alcohol around. How did you handle it? Emphasizing their personal choice, right? That this is up to you. You're not ready to change. That's okay, or you don't feel you need to change. Reframing. So, saying, yeah, you can't handle intense situations without a glass of wine, right? And so, reframe, they start saying, wow, well, no, I can handle some situations. And now we have a dialogue going. And therapeutic paradox, right? So, last ditch effort, you're right. It does. You don't think you have a problem, and maybe you should just keep doing what you're doing. How do you think that would work out? Or how do you think that would go, right? So use that with caution. That is not an opening move. And that's what I have for today. What I'm working on next is a CBT model of working with addiction, and so I'll post that soon. The reason I reviewed all of this is that regardless of your theoretical orientation, oh wait, I forgot I can do, oh what? So regardless of your theoretical orientation, you're going to use these skills, these basic attending skills, the motivational interviewing, engaging, where they are with change. So take your time, work alongside your client. The theoretical stuff we're going to get into, and so here's some CBT techniques and how it works, right? It starts with the core beliefs. Here is the REBT way, here's the DBT way, and it just gives you more tools in your tool belt. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know what you need. I hope everyone is doing well. And if you need anything at all, please let me know. Take care. Bye.